Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Department Q Episode 5. Spoilers for the episode as always, and this is a Patreon-sponsored review, so thank you very much to Bornout for making the pick. So, the end of the last episode revealed a new character in Merritt's past, that being Sam Haig. And this episode kind of dives into that a little bit and has our main duo, or trio in some cases, because Rose is a bit more involved this episode, looking into who he was and why he and Merritt knew each other. They have no idea if there was a romantic relationship there. Now, we as the audience know that there was at least a sexual relationship eventually, although the flashbacks we get in this episode are how they first met, which was not initially romantic or sexual. It was more, he was a reporter, he's a journalist, and he contacted Merritt to try and do an interview, and we see that sequence of her showing up and kind of trying to figure out why he wants to talk to her, given that he is an organized crime reporter as opposed to something more directly related to what she's involved in. And it's a very heated discussion. You know, she's kind of sizing him up, he's sizing her up. Honestly, other than just the raw tension of it, there's not even necessarily that much to suggest an attraction per se. Certainly from her side of things, but clearly that's where it ends up going once she does get involved. It does tie into some other things, though. We find out that the young woman that we saw her have an interview with in a flashback in a previous episode, we kind of get more to that this episode, because it turns out that woman ended up almost being killed in prison for talking to Merritt because they thought she was a snitch, and that might be tied to her disappearance because it all lines up with when she disappeared. It was a couple of days later, so there's a lot going on there where they think that may be connected. There's also a whole other crime going on that doesn't seem to actually be related to Merritt's disappearance, even though it's a pretty compelling avenue to go down once they kind of have the idea. Basically, it's Carl's partner in hospital who kind of helps with the idea of the fact that Merritt had some money from one of her parents kind of stowed away somewhere in a Jersey bank account, and who gets access to that, because the brother of course won't be taking care of himself, and it's well, who's his legal guardian since he can't make those decisions? And that leads back to the woman running the home that he lives in, the care home. So we get a big sequence of Carl going after her and accusing her of effectively taking in patients who come from rich families who have no other siblings or kin to make their decisions for them, so she gets to be the legal decision maker, the power of attorney for all of them. And not only that, it seems to keep them all pretty doped up so that they're all pretty just sleepy the whole time. So it feels like she's got a bit of a racket going, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it has anything to do with Merritt's disappearance. In fact, Carl even posits the idea that maybe Merritt's brother was the first time she did this, and it wasn't even something that she planned for or intended to do. It just kind of fell into her lap, and then once she realized she could start making money this way, kind of gaming the system from her patients, she effectively just started doing more of that. She started going after very specific clientele so that she could extort money out of them, all under the guise of the legal system and the care system. So obviously, it really emphasized her when we first met her and showed off her fancy office with all of her priceless heirlooms, and it's okay, maybe that's how she can afford all this crap, is because she's actually skimming a lot of money off of her patients, and not just Merritt's brother, but a number of them. So I thought that sequence was quite well done, actually. The way they storm into that building, Akram's there, Rose is there, and they go and check on the brother whilst Carl talks to her. And it feels like the moving parts are all syncing up quite nicely, and he's getting to the bottom of the interrogation, if you will, even though she's trying to hide behind the rules and saying, hey, you need a warrant for this, you need that, and he's pointing out the flaws in her argument and why she's getting more defensive than she needs to be if she simply isn't guilty of it. So it's compelling enough to watch. Obviously, one of the subjects that comes up in this show, and especially this episode, is this idea of when is going beyond the rules that they should be following as investigators, right? Not just Carl, even Akram gets pulled up by the boss lady for that little Vulcan nerve pin she did an episode or two ago to the kind of the drug addicts that were living in Merritt's old house. And she's like, hey, they showed up. One of them showed up with a crushed windpipe, and Akram points out that he did not crush the windpipe. In fact, if he crushed it, he wouldn't be able to tell them anything because he wouldn't be able to speak. He simply bruised it, suggesting that Akram has a very, very like strong control over what he was doing. He knew exactly how much pressure he was applying. He knew what he was up to, and knew not to apply too much pressure. So she basically says, hey, you're out there assisting. You're not a police officer here. And not that that would necessarily even make it okay. That would still be crossing a line, but it's especially bad if you're out there working on behalf of this department and you're not officially a part of it and you're not authorized to be doing stuff. Which notably stuck out in my mind because later on, when Rose is with him, because Rose gets an idea to go and investigate something, and it's kind of what ties back into the girl in prison, is she actually just introduces him as another police officer, and he has this little smirk, which is like, so he almost is going to jump in and correct her, but it'd be kind of weird to do it in front of the person they're talking to like debate that and like make the person like not sure if you can trust them as police or not. So like I get why he doesn't, but it's also kind of nice that Rose just sees him as a cop, you know, in the sense of this. She respects his abilities. So it's interesting, and that's also a nice little payoff to this idea of like, will Carl ever like give Rose any props? And he never does, right? He's constantly chastising her, of course, and he's obviously a bit of a dick, which she brings up and so on. But it's actually his partner who says, hey, would it kill you to just fake that you're impressed with something she did once in a while to give her the boost, to give her some motivation and make her feel part of the team? And he never says any words of encouragement. However, when she comes up with an idea to look into this this laundry place, and not a laundrette in the sense where it's just machines, but like more of like a dry cleaning style place where you go and like hand your stuff in. She explains the idea of like, oh, it's weird that she went to this one place that was different from her usual place, but only one time, and it was the week before she went missing. There's something fishy there. Basically, when she starts saying she wants to go and investigate this, Carl's like, oh yeah, what bright idea have you got? And she spends a good 60 seconds explaining it. And at the end of it, Carl, instead of chastising her and giving her a snarky comment, he just says, take Akram. Which, while it's not exactly praise, he's kind of admitting by not saying anything that it is a good idea. He's saying, hey, that's worth pursuing, but without saying it, right? Praise by omission, which is not the most exciting version of praise ever, but when you're dealing with a prick like Carl, it maybe sticks out a little bit more as something to notice. So that was like a fun little bit. But to get into more of the Sam Hague stuff, they spend some time looking into like who he was. He's this reporter, which involves going to see his boss, who doesn't really know anything because he worked kind of off the grid and just called in when he had something to actually report, when it was kind of done. And he was very secretive about having like an online presence or having photos of himself anywhere. And part of that is because he, interviewed criminals and organized crime, and there might be repercussions for some of the things that he writes. So it makes sense why he'd want to keep his identity pretty secret, which kind of goes hand in hand with how Merrick keeps her life very private. You can kind of see why they ended up appealing to each other in some ways. But yeah, he was like also his one hobby seems to be rock climbing. He goes to this place that has the fake walls, but in a big outdoor one as well. But I say outdoor, it's still inside a perimeter with a gate, because the whole idea is that he actually died very close to when Merritt died, and it's almost like he was killed to be taken out of the picture alongside whatever happened to her. And they're still kind of maybe thinking she might be dead. Obviously, we know she's not, but it does seem to be connected to him, and like, there's a lot of reasons why this doesn't seem right. Akram asked for some details about, how often does he come? How long does it take for him to climb? He's supposed to do it with a partner, but he didn't on this occasion, and sometimes he doesn't. How long would he expect to be doing this for? And it all kind of adds up to this idea that, like, well, he fell off this fake cliff thing out here. I can't remember what they called it. They had a name for it, but it was like a fake cliff they climbed. And it's like, okay, he fell up there, right? That's if it was an accident and his car is locked and it's still here because it was sort of trapped inside when everyone shut up for the weekend and he was here all weekend. Why could we not find his keys? They'd either be on his persons, right? Or if maybe not on him because he's doing an athletic thing, so they'd be in his locker, right? Just kind of like going to any sort of gym or swimming place or anything like that. And they're not there. It suggests that someone took his keys, or potentially looked into his car for something and locked it after the, you know, it suggests something. It suggests that all the pieces aren't adding up. And Akram's got a very interesting point where he's like, hey, back, you know, home in Syria, typically when there was a case like this, when everything felt like the information, like, you know, when all these things fell off and it felt like people were ignoring them, it was never because of incompetence. It was never an accident that were being ignored. It was someone is choosing to ignore them because they're complicit, at least in some small way, of helping cover something up. And the interesting thing that leads to, actually, is the boss, right? Who has a couple of different scenes this episode. One with a therapist who doesn't have a good interaction with her, actually. Kelly MacDonald and her have it kind of, I wouldn't say it's heated, but it's very passive aggressive, and it kind of ends with you know, the boss saying, well, maybe we just need to find him a new therapist. Maybe his therapist isn't working out. And she's like, that might be true. Go and shop around, and I'm sure he's going to love the process of finding a different therapist and trying different ones, but that's fine. I'll leave. And she had a scene earlier with Rose as well, helping her move a desk when she's trying to come and find Carl. He's still not showing up for his appointments. Would you believe it? I know, shocking state of affairs. But it leads to a very interesting scene where Carl basically questions his boss about, hey, you were working here when this disappearance happened, when Merritt disappeared, and you had this one detective on the case, and he looked into it, blah, blah, blah. But he basically suggests, hey, why did you drop that case? Why did you close it, right? It's an old cold case, but why was it closed in the first place? And she says, well, because leads dried up, there was nothing to go on, and I needed the detective on another case. And he's like, okay. And he effectively accuses her of basically just following an order, right? That someone called her and told her to drop it, that someone high up the food chain made it clear they wanted this to be let go, and she complied. And he kind of effectively says this without outright spelling it out. And she obviously doesn't like this accusation, but interestingly, she doesn't really deny it per se. She kind of goes down the route of, like, effectively, again, by omission, kind of admitting it, but saying, look, I'm the first woman who's ever had this job, who's ever been in charge here at, you know, in this big city, in this police station, with this rank. I'm the first woman to ever do that. And it's not only important for my career to keep that position, but it's kind of important for any future women who want this job going forward, or anyone, just to show that this can be done, and so on. Basically saying that she felt like she had to follow the order, even if she didn't agree with it, even if she thought it was fishy at the time. She had enough of a reason to not want to ruffle the feathers and not fight back against the system. And Carl, of course, has no problem swearing and yelling and fighting back at anyone who tells him not to do something. Like, he is gung-ho about it. So I thought it was an interesting sequence because, like, the way she justified it, it was never about, oh, like, it was the right thing to do, or it was something that, you know, was just let go. It kind of confirmed what Akram had said, is that someone chose to let this go, someone chose to ignore the details. And it's not that she herself is malicious in the whole party of it, but that she had reasons to feel like, if I don't play a ball with this, it might compromise this position that I'm in, and it might harm a chance I've got to do things later. And part of that, you could say, is like some sort of, like, you're sort of trying to convince yourself after the fact, or justify something because you were scared. And maybe that's partly true as well. But it was a more interesting response than just like, oh, she did something bad, right? You know, he's uncovered something. It didn't turn her into a villain immediately for possibly agreeing with an order at some point. And it's not like it seems like she knows anything about what happened to Merritt or anything. It just seems like somewhere up the food chain, someone suggested to drop this, and she followed that advice. It may not have been a friendly request as well. It may have been a bit more intense than that. We have no idea of knowing unless we get more information about it. But I thought that was a very interesting sequence. I was curious to see how that played out, and it is kind of interesting, sort of like, you know, because Carl, like, is willing to do things a little bit around the rules and, like, not really wait for warrants, and it's typical, you know, cop TV trope stuff, but it does kind of feel like he is reckless because he thinks he'll ultimately get away with it, and maybe he doesn't respect the fact that someone else who is a woman, or who is an immigrant, won't get the same leeway if they don't play by the rules, and yet he's very quick to criticize anyone else for just playing by the rules and not doing what he does. But he's more likely to get away with it just because of who he is, right? It's that simple truth. And we see everyone in this episode in some level or another, right? We see Akron be threatened by the boss to kind of play by the rules or he'll be gone. We see the boss say, hey, I had to kind of do this, or it might have compromised my position. We see Rose even be threatened by Carl at one point, hey, do what you're told or you'll go back upstairs to the crappy job you didn't like. Constantly, there's these roadblocks for these other characters. And while people keep telling him not to do stuff, he keeps doing them anyway. And maybe there's a suggestion here, there's a happy medium in the middle where he does need to pull back because he's too much of a loose cannon, but all the other characters should maybe have a bit more freedom than they actually do, perhaps. So it's an interesting way to think about the characters and their interactions. His partner's also kind of a dick. Like he's a dick to his nurse, where he's like dropping orange peels on the hospital floor, and then like he laughs it off when he gets the peels thrown back at him, but it does feel like an especially shitty thing to do. He's been a bit of an asshole, but he's helping with the case. It seems like he's getting more and more involved. Carl is pissed at him though, because he never told Carl that he was doing some physical therapy, and there's a chance he might walk again. It's not a guarantee, but it's almost like part of it doesn't want to get his hopes up, although Carl might even feel like this was more about making him guilty by keeping it strictly, and I know I am like never going to walk again kind of thing. So that was an interesting little detail actually, about the partner. But yeah, so yeah, there was a lot going on this episode, because there was kind of these phases of like the investigation of Sam Hague, which was like, okay, what was his relationship to Merritt? Is it personal, professional? And obviously seemingly it's kind of a bit of both at this point. And it's not until after the girl who went to prison and felt betrayed by Merritt because she didn't get her out of jail when she felt threatened by others for talking to her, and she ended up stabbed in the eye. And that's actually what prompted Merritt to go to Sam Hague to talk to him as a reporter, and then seemingly the romantic relationship developed from there. Now, how quickly that developed, it's hard to say at this point, but what I would say is that seemingly this is the start of the domino effect, and it feels like whatever someone wanted to cover up. Now, who exactly are these people who have taken Merritt, and why is that related to Sam Hague? Is it related to organized crime? Is that why... I mean, it's an old woman and like one guy, seemingly, from what we've seen in previous episodes. Like, they don't feel like they're part of organized crime, unless they're all that's left of a crime family, maybe, and that's why they're so vindictive about it. It's interesting. It's also interesting that the woman at the cleaners, she like hated Merritt. As soon as they bring up Merritt, she's like, oh, I hate that bitch. Like, she is like avid because she blames her for what happened to her sister in or her daughter, sorry, in prison, right? So yeah, so Merritt does feel guilty about that, even though she did clearly she basically just washes her hands of it. When the girl says, hey, I'm scared something's going to happen to me, she's like, oh, hey, are you on drugs again? Well, you've made a lot of bad decisions, I can't really help you. And that's even what her boss says when she finds out about the stabbing. He tries to hand wave it as, hey, this is not on you, this is a series of bad decisions for a troubled person, that's what landed her where she is. But Merritt actually seems to feel guilt here. She feels like she could have done something and didn't, and that provokes her to go to Sam. And maybe she did start talking to Sam about something bigger that has led to why someone wants revenge on her. And maybe it isn't just about what happened on the island back when she was younger. But that probably still feeds into it, let's be honest, because we spent a long time doing it. We also spent a bit more time talking about the bird. The partner recognizes what type of bird it is immediately, because he used to be a fisherman. What a career path, fisherman to police inspector. It's a hell of a combo. I guess the other big thing to really bring up this episode is the moment when they're leaving the newspaper office and the journalist tries to talk to Carl about the young rookie cop, the PC who died the day that Carl was shot and his partner was shot, and his wife has just given birth, right, like a day or two ago, something like that. And he wanted a comment, hey, do you have a message for her? And when Carl kind of just sort of says get lost and walks on, he yells out like, hey, she blames you. Right? And when he won't let it go, Carl shoves him against the table and he kind of falls over. And as he's walking out, the journalist doesn't give up. He keeps yelling, hey, she said it should have been you that died. And Carl turns around and says, well, maybe it should have been. which kind of is the insight into. I mean, it's not a surprise. I feel like everyone watching the show up until this point clearly thinks that's what he feels. But this ends up in a newspaper because he just said it to a journalist. So the partner sees it in the newspaper. His roommate sees it in the newspaper. The therapist, I don't think we get her reaction, but presumably she probably saw it in the newspaper, and his boss definitely saw it in the newspaper and tells him to, quit it. Like, don't stop saying insane things to the press that make us look bad. That make you look, unfit to serve. Which, as it turns out, we find this out when she's talking to his therapist, that they're kind of abusing a loophole here to get him back at work, because he is technically, because he's working on a cold case, it doesn't count as active police duty, which is a bit of there's a really shaky line there, because he's still going out and questioning people. But anyway, the other thing I didn't mention about going to the care home to sort of accuse the woman who runs it of like embezzling money and whatnot is that they actually leave with the brother. They get the brother out. Akram straight up like tells the orderly to back down, because the orderlies are saying, "You've got no permission to be in here," and Akram's like, "Listen, my friend, you want to step aside." And the guy backs down, but for a minute I was like, oh god, he's already going to go back on his promise not to get into like any like physical like alterations for the boss lady. He makes it clear they're walking out of here, and they do. They take the brother to his carer who used to live with them, and they seem to be very happy about it. And it actually feels like Carl, for once, has done a good deed. Because, I mean, again, he's a dick about it. As soon as he opens the door, he's like, "Don't make me regret this." But then you see them hug, and it kind of feels like he rescued the brother from this potentially exploitative relationship that he was having with, his caretaker at this home. And when I say relationship, I don't mean like a romantic relationship. I just mean, he was being abused in a sense. And now he's rescued him. He's also cheered this woman up because she liked looking after him. It's kind of the most happiest ending these two characters could probably have for now. And it seemed like a good deed was done for the day. Now, Carl's still miserable. He still goes home miserable, and it's a whole thing. But hey, something good was achieved in this episode, and they can feel like they had a little bit of a win. Poor Merritt's still sitting in a tank, staring at all the names she's written down, and now including Sam Hague. She's starting to think outside the box, that it's not just people she's helped put away, which is probably what she has been thinking for a long time. So it seems like she's starting to expand her thoughts. And the cliffhanger for the end of the episode is the moment where she calls Sam in the flashback and says, "Hey, okay, let's talk." So that's clearly going to be an important thread we're still going to follow from here on. So no, it's interesting stuff, because I mean, we didn't know what he did for a living when we saw him last episode. That was like new information at the start of this one, and it kind of comes out in a weird way because they're at the rock climbing place. You're like, oh, he's a rock climber. Like, that's the first thing we learn about him, and then the newspaper stuff kind of comes out from there. But yeah, no. So, interesting case details. I mean, I do think that this episode felt very packed of lots of things going on. And to be fair, most of them felt pretty important. It felt like it was doing a lot of interesting stuff, either from a character perspective, comparing characters against one another, and then actually having some payoff to some of the things that we've set up. But it did make me feel like towards the end of the episode, I was like, oh god, like I barely remember the rock climbing stuff at the start, because we've kind of moved on so far from it. Like, we're not, like, because we were investigating who Sam Hague was for the first like 15-20 minutes, and then all this stuff with the woman running the care home took over, it was very easy to almost forget like how we started. So all of it was good, but it maybe kind of jumbled together, made for maybe a little bit of a weird pacing of an episode, I would maybe say. It's not a big complaint by any stretch, but it's the one critique really that's kind of sticking out to me, is that. But yeah, the only other thing I would really say actually is that sometimes, and this is a very specific problem to me, or generally being Scottish, is that sometimes like actors who are Scottish like are speaking in such a kind of like, they're enunciating so much to be clear, right? Which is obviously kind of a good thing in some ways, but because I am Scottish and I notice when someone's doing it, it feels a little bit unnatural and therefore less realistic as far as acting goes. And I think there's like one or two examples of that here for me. I think the boss lady, whose name I never remember. What was her name? Moira's her name. But yeah, Kate Dickie. Like, I do not mean to say she's not a good actor necessarily in any way, but I just sometimes I feel like she's definitely enunciating for people who might have trouble understanding Scottish accents, and it kind of sticks out to me in a way that feels a little bit unnatural. But that's a very specific thing that only certain people are going to notice, and honestly, it's not even necessarily a bad thing per se, but it's a little bit different from other people who just come across a lot more natural to me sounding. And it's entirely possible that it's maybe even more just of a regional accent thing than it is anything else, and it sounds weird to me because of that. But regardless, solid episode, interesting pieces to the case, and Carl in a roundabout way saying, "Hey, good idea, Rose," but without saying that was borderline heartwarming. So, hey, points for that. But there you go. That's my thoughts on this episode of Department Q. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, if you want to support everything, you can do that over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep everything coming, both here and over on the movie podcast channel, Mail Fuzz Movies. Check that out if you haven't. But that is me. So thank you once again. See you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?